Mhm. Okay, so welcome to this session on counting and combinatorics. We'll be going on this journey into some of the various methods used for counting and some techniques in combinatorics which will be useful in the long run. Okay, so this is a complete overview of what we'll be doing in these 2 days. So we'll be taking an overview of counting, some of the basic principles which are included in counting. Then we'll move on to permutations and combinations, the definition wise as well as example wise. Next, we'll do the pigeonhole principle and some problems based on the pigeonhole principle. And of course, we'll be solving all types of examples and problems while we are moving ahead. Okay, so today, what I have planned is we'll be doing a brief introduction to set theory because set theory is crucial for counting and combinatorics. You'll learn more about that soon, and we'll be doing an introduction to counting, some counting principles. We'll have some basic problems, and we'll also have permutations. Also, we'll be doing principle of inclusion exclusion, and let's start. Okay, so introduction to counting. So counting is when we speak about counting, it is not completely mathematical. So when we say counting, we just want to count the number of objects. We have been learning counting since an early age, a really small age. So you like count apples or you count the number of seeds or something like that, and that is also valid as counting. But what we'll be doing in this camp is we'll see counting from a different perspective, from a sort of mathematical perspective, and why how it helps us in solving problems that of different types. And up till now, what problems you may have seen may not be covered in that, but some other problems may be covered. So we'll be looking at them soon. Okay, so what it has a huge impact on our lives, and essentially when we are counting anything, it means that we know the quantity, we know the number, and then we can work with the number. So we are having some data to work with us, and for that data we need counting. What we want to do in counting is we want to count the cardinality in some set of elements that we require, and these are just fancy terms that we use to describe that we want to count a number. And we will be doing set theory right now. Okay, so let's move on. Why counting? So I just explained why one method why I need counting, but another perspective could be we want to find a number. So if so this example is just a simple extremely short example on why you might need counting. So suppose you are the owner of a hotel and you want to advertise your hotel. So you, on the flyer, you want to tell how many different kinds of thalis you provide. So you see there are some people who say we can provide up to 80 thalis, we can provide 700 different thalis, or maybe 1000, who knows. But suppose you are the owner of a hotel, you want to find out how many different thalis you can provide to your customer based on the given possible food items. So there are two types of rice you can make, there are three types of bread that you can make, there are three types of dal that you can make. So you can imagine this scenario, and that note that we are considering that each thali must contain at least one type of all food items. So you can't give a thali which is only rice and bread, you must include the dal. Yeah, or you can't give a thali which is only bread or dal, you must give rice. So there has to be at least one item. So you can't count nothing as a thali, right? So nothing won't be a thali because you need at least one type of rice, one type of bread, and one type of dal. But you can have one some type of rice. Suppose you have fried rice, you have some bread, some sort of bread, and you have some dal, and you can have such a thali. So how many such thalis can you make? And what if we have some pickle? What if we have some papad? What if we have some pulao or something? What if a customer has an option to choose either a chutney or a dal or something like that? So considering all these scenarios, counting can give us an answer to this question of how many different thalis can be made. And this is just a very small example. Counting has extreme approaches. You can use counting in places like proofs and graph theory, and we can even look have a small example about that as well. Okay, let's move on to set theory. So set theory is something that is quite essential for counting, and I'll just explain to you what a set means. So a set is just a unordered collection of elements. So what I mean by unordered is that it does not matter whether it's AB or it's BA. So if you consider two-digit numbers, we have 21 and we have 12. Both of them are different. So you cannot consider 1 2 and 2 1 as in the numbers, in the case of the numbers, as unordered. But if you see, for example, this set, blue sock 136 40 factorial and maybe two washers. So even can be a set. It does not mathematical at all. You can include anything in a set, but what we'll be looking at is a mathematical set. So a set is defined as a collection of unordered elements. So we have some elements in a set. There can be zero elements, of course. We have over here the set Y is an null set, empty set, or a void set. There are many names, and you see this has nothing in it. So literally it has zero elements, and the number of elements also define a really important quantity, which is the cardinality. The cardinality of a set is the number of elements that are present in it, and we represent the cardinality as you see the name of the set in between these two bars. So we had seen these two bars in divisibility as well, but please do not confuse these bars, and these bars have more than 10 meanings in mathematics. And so here in our context, we will be talking only and only about cardinality when we speak of these bars. So two bars, and in between you have the name of the set. That itself is the cardinality of the set. So we go to the earlier example once again, and you have the set X. You know, it's a big set with 1 2 3 4 7 888. That's 12,965, and a red shirt as well. And so the number of elements in X is going to be 8, because we just counted 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 and 8. So there's 8 elements in the set, so we can say that the cardinality of the set is 8, and we represent that as bar X bar is equal to 8. And also the cardinality of the null set is 0, like we discussed earlier. So we say that the cardinality of the null set is 0, and you can try this out. You can find the cardinality of P, and P is really tricky. It's because it's a set that contains a set itself, and that can be really tricky sometimes to get, but this is really simple, because just consider the all the sets as one, and you have this one over here, and you have the set containing 1 comma 1 over here, then you have the set containing 1, and you have 11. So there's 1 2 3 and 4, and the cardinality of P will be 4. Okay, so now moving forward to a different topic, that is counting principles, and this forms the really crux of counting, of combinatorics, and and it's applied to a lot of mathematics. It is applied to construction, it applied to proofs, and a lot of parts of mathematics as well. So what we'll be learning about is some basic principles of counting, that is the multiplication and addition principle. The addition principle is often called the pi, or the PIE, or the principle of inclusion and exclusion, and that's also another fancy name, and we'll be talking about that as well. Okay, so here we have the multiplication rule, and this might seem really tough, alien at first, but it's actually quite simple. So what this says, let's just see what it says. If a procedure can be broken down into k steps, and step 1 can be performed in n1 ways, step 2 can be performed in n2 ways, and step 2 can be performed in n2 ways regardless of the outcomes of previous steps. So this is steps, and we go on, so till step k. So what this means is that step 1 can be performed in n1 ways, step 2 can be performed in n2 ways regardless of the outcomes of previous ways, step 3 can be performed in n3 ways regardless of the outcomes of previous ways, step 4 in n4 ways regardless of the outcomes of previous ways, and so on till some number k. this is just a variable k, and we denote it for simplicity. So k can take any values, any natural number values to be precise, and so on till step k can be performed in nk ways, regardless of the outcomes of previous steps. This should be steps. Sorry for that. And then the total number of outcomes. So let's just have a look. Let's have a quick recap. So if a procedure can be broken down into k steps, we have k steps. So suppose there is a procedure. Suppose you want to choose the thali. Okay, so you want to choose the thali, and you can break it down into some steps, right? You can first choose the dal, then you can choose the rice, then you can choose the bread, and maybe then you can choose the chutney. So you can break it down into 4 steps. And also this can be really nicely represented with the help of trees. But also we can differentiate between the first, second, third, and fourth steps, and the outcomes of the steps are defined regardless of whether the first outcome is without the influence of the first outcome, you might say. And that is because we can still choose. Suppose the first step is choosing the dal, and the second step is choosing the rice. So we can still choose all the types of the rice, even if we choose some type of dal. So suppose there are 2 types of dal, so we chose the type a dal. Still we can choose 4 types of rice. So suppose there is x, y, z, and w type of rice. So we can still say that, I mean, if we choose type a, then still we can go for xyzw, and if we choose type b, still we can go for xyzw. So that's different, that's not same. So what this essentially means is that if the first step can be performed in n1 ways, any number of ways, this n1 could have been a, this could have been x, this could have been y. So first step can be performed in some ways, second step can be performed in some ways, third step, and so on till kth step can be performed in some ways. Then the total number of outcomes of these steps would be n1 times n2 times n3 times n4 times and so on till nk. And so in our earlier example of the thali, as we will see here. Okay, so these are the steps of the procedure of the multiplication rule. So for choosing the thali, we have the first step to choose the rice, and there are 2 types of rice that we can choose. Second step would be to choose the bread, and there are 3 types of bread that we can choose. The third step would be to choose the dal, and we have 3 choices for choosing the dal. So according to the multiplication principle, we should be having n1 times n2 times n3 ways. So that would be 2 times 3 times 3 ways for the total number of outcomes that we can have of the thali. So there should be 18 number of thalis. So there can be 18 different thalis. Okay, so the procedure of selection of thali can be broken down into 3 steps, that are 2, 3, and 3 choices respectively. And this is really important, that the choices are independent of the outcomes of the previous steps. And by applying the multiplication rule, we have 3 into 2 into 2, that's 18 number of thalis, 18 number of distinct thalis. Okay, so just another example would be that if you have 5 t-shirts and 3 jeans, and there can be 15 different combination of shirts and jeans. So suppose you have a blue shirt, blue t-shirt, and some X jeans, and you have blue t-shirt and Y jeans, you have blue t-shirt and Z jeans, then you have red t-shirt and XYZ, then you have green t-shirt and XYZ, then you have a purple t-shirt and XYZ, and the last you could have a black t-shirt and XYZ. So just simply adding all of the possibilities, we can get this. And the multiplication rule is just a generalization of what we can see in a tree, and the tree diagram will could really help in visualizing this. And also you can think of it in a different perspective, that you can wear, if you want to wear different combinations of shirts and jeans for some days, then how many days can you wear it? So the answer would be 15 days, right? Okay, let's move ahead. Okay, so like this, we'll be having problems after the end of each and every concept. So you can answer the questions while the concept remains straight in your mind. Okay. Also, one thing I would like all of you to know, that multiplication rule is simple. You might find it really easy, but some of the most important proofs and some of the hardest proofs can be easily accomplished using it. It's a quite powerful tool, and maybe we'll be going over some of the nice applications of multiplication rule. Okay, so you can answer this in the chat as well, but I've posted the answer here. Okay. Suppose you want to go to a fashion show. You have three distinct watches, four jeans, two shirts, and two suits. And we assume all of these are distinct. And that's just because the multiplication rule states it to be distinct. And in how many different ways can you choose a complete outfit to wear to the fashion show? Okay, so you can break down the procedure of selecting a complete outfit into some steps, and you can have, well, the first step as choosing a watch, second step as choosing a jeans, third step as choosing a shirt, and fourth step as choosing a suit. Okay, so then you can just multiply the number of outcomes, because they are independent of the earlier outcomes. As you can have, I mean, you can go with some X type of watch, blue jeans, a white shirt, and suppose some A type of suit. And I mean, you can see that for each watch you can still have four jeans, and for each of those four jeans you can have two shirts, and for each of those two shirts you can have two suits. And the same is for all the ones below it. I've just considered a single case of them. So by the multiplication rule, we get that the total number of outfits you can choose to have a complete outfit to wear to the fashion show is 48, and that's quite a large number. Okay, um, let's move ahead. Yeah, now this is a tricky question, and this is a really nice application, and many twisted questions of this version of this sort come in Olympiads or I've seen many of these questions in Olympiad sort of problems, and they're really easy to solve, but sometimes they can be tricky, because here the part that comes into play is the independence part of the outcomes. So the outcomes are not necessarily independent, and these are just example questions. So they may come in different forms, so there can be I've seen the same version of this question with a secretary and a treasurer and a president sort of scenario, and they usually do this to confuse you, so that you don't know, so you get confused whether you have to apply this, or maybe are these independent or not independent. And we'll look at how you can get be confident of whether you have to use it or not. Even in permutations and combinations, there are a lot of confusing questions. Okay, so now the question is that how many four digit numbers exist such that no digits are repeated? So an example of such a four digit number would be 1234, or maybe 7619, or maybe 2017, or maybe 2018, 2019. And okay, so now we want to break this down into a procedure. So how do we do this? There are four digits. We know that there are four digits. So maybe we can break it down for first digit, second digit, third digit, and fourth digit. Okay, now we consider four spots, one for each digit. And we see number one, number two, number three, and number four. Okay, so there is a question in the chat saying what is the proof for multiplication rule? And as I've said earlier, that actual proof of a basic concept requires quite a high level of understanding, and it's quite difficult to actually prove this by what I've learned, but we can quite easily verify this, that this works for using a tree diagram. Maybe I'll try to share the tree diagram if I can after the presentation, and you can easily verify this with the help of a tree diagram. So you don't have a exact proof of what we can call a proof. So hope that helps. And Okay, there are some answers. Let's go ahead. So the first step is to choose a digit for this place, and we went this way because just because this is the first. But in some cases, we will go with the last, or maybe with the third, or maybe with the second, just because there are more constraints on the if you have an even number, then you have more constraints on the fourth spot, because then you can't choose 1357 over here. But if you have an odd number, you can choose 2468 over here, and so on. We will see that later as well. Okay, the first step will be to choose a digit for number one. It can be done in 9 ways, because if the first digit is zero, then it won't remain a 4-digit number, right? It would become a 3-digit number. So we can choose, we can keep one, we can keep two, we can keep three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine over here. So there are nine numbers that we can keep here. Then we choose a digit for number two. This step can also be done in 9 ways, because now we are including the zero, but we are excluding the number that we have taken here, and that's because there no digits are repeated. We don't want any digits to be repeated. So if this number is suppose x, then we cannot choose x here, but we can choose zero. Here we can't choose zero, so the number will remain the same, that is 9. And you can't choose this x and this y, whatever you have taken over here, in here. So this can be done in 9 minus 1, that is 8 ways, and this can be done in 7 ways, similar. And as the earlier outcomes do not influence our outcomes. So what I mean by that is, even if you choose 1 here, you can still choose 2 here, you can still choose 3 here, you can still choose 4 here, you can still choose 5 anywhere, you can still choose 6 anywhere. And actually, independence has its own influence. And I mean, that it's not simply direct independence from any outcome, but it can have its own meanings in different scenarios, in different situations. But right now we can say that the earlier outcomes do not influence our outcomes. And so the answer by multiplication rule, or multiplication principle for short, would be 9 times 9 times 7 times 8, because we have 9 times 9 times 7 times 8 numbers. Okay, right. Mhm. Okay, so let's go ahead. Now we have a question which cannot be directly solved by multiplication principle. We will have to check the independence of it. Okay, now how many odd integers between 1000 and 9999 have distinct digits? So here we will still go with the breaking with the construction of the procedure, and we will say that the procedure can be broken down into 4 steps: choosing the first digit, choosing the second digit, choosing the third digit, and choosing the fourth digit, because that won't be affected at all. That the construction is remains specific. What changes is the number of outcomes for each step, for each construction. You can rearrange the order as you want, and rearranging the order plays a major role. And sometimes you can it helps a lot if you want to find the cardinality of very constrained sets. And okay, so the outcomes here are not independent of the earlier outcomes, and that is something that we need to be wary of. We'll have to use a different technique, but that's just a different perspective of the same technique that we will be using. So we will switch the way we choose the number of the step. So here number one represents choosing step one, number two represents choosing step two, number three represents choosing step three, and four represents choosing step four. But that won't do here, because if say first of all we cannot choose zero or in the first place, and plus we don't want to choose one uh, 2468 or 0 in the fourth place. And that will definitely affect our understanding of the problem as we see it, because if you draw a tree diagram, you will see that some of the branches will be similar while some of the branches will be different. So there will be 5 branches for some, but there will be 10 branches for the other, and due to that the outcome won't be independent. So we will order the steps in such a manner that the most selective step comes first. And what is the most selective step here? That odd integer, we know odd, with the fourth digit must be odd, it must be 1, 3, 5, or 7. Okay, so it's the most selective. So we will say that step 1 will be to choose a digit for number 4, for digit number 4. And the digit number 4, oh, I think, okay, 5 ways. And we will be excluding the even numbers here because we want odd digits over here. And then we go first digit because that is a bit less selective. We don't want 1, we don't want 0 over there, sorry. And because that is selective, but that is less selective. And then step 2 or 3 in any order will do. And we will have 5 ways to do this: 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. And we won't take 0 over here, right? We cannot take 0 over here, so we exclude 0, and also exclude the number that we took here. So we have taken a number over here, right? So if we took x here, we cannot take x here, right? So we won't take x here. And due to that, there are two numbers less, 0 and x. And so there are 8 ways for this. Then there are 8 ways for this as well, because we are including 0 here and excluding some y that was taken over here. And 7 ways similarly. Now the outcomes will be independent, because for any of the 5 ways, any of the 5 digits you choose for here, there will remain 8 digits over here, and there will remain 8 digits. Next. Okay, Akhilesh, MP or MR still means multiplication principle or multiplication rule. So I just used it as a shortcut because it's used quite a lot, and I don't want to keep writing the same. Next, we'll be doing. Okay, so here's a small addition to what we have done right now. So we had seen sets, and there's also a concept called as power set of a set. And power set of a set is denoted as P of S, and it is defined as the set of all the subsets of S. So let me just simplify this with an example. You can say that power set of A will be, for A is equal to 1 comma 2 comma C, would be P of A equal to 1, the set containing 1, set containing 2, set containing C, 1 comma 2, 2 comma C, 1 comma C, 1 comma 2 comma C, and the null set as well. And so we define the power set as the set of all subsets of X. When all subsets, so subset just means any set which is contained in the original set. So here any of these sets, 1, 2, C, 1 comma 2, 2 comma C, and 1 comma C, all of these are contained in the set A. So you can say that there are all the subsets of A. Even null set is the subset of every set. Null set is the subset of every set. And this is also useful sometimes. Okay, so now we see that power set of A, oh, this should have been A, is cardinality of the power set of A is 8. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So there are 8 elements in power set of A. So the cardinality of the power set is 8. And we have learned about multiplication rules. So can you find the cardinality of the power set of any set X containing n elements? So you have to find the cardinality of power set of X, given that the cardinality of X is n. So you have n elements in A, then how many elements will be there in the power set of X? And I already have the answers in the chat, and you can post the answers in the chat if you have it. This is just a fun addition, and this is quite useful. Power set is quite useful. Okay, I'll just wait for a few seconds if there are any answers. So if you okay, Krishna, if null set is not included, then n plus 1. No, I don't think that would be right. No, right. Because just consider this case of A, such that A has 3 elements. So cardinality of A is 3. And even if we exclude this set, we still have 7. So how can that be right? Okay, Chinmay, up till now, we have Tanmay, Samyak Sangvi, Khushi Kucheria given the right answer, and I believe Krishna's answer is wrong. I think Krishna, if you think of it as a construction, just think of how you can construct a power set. Okay. Uh, mhm. Okay, Vishwajit, for you, the power set is just a set of all the subsets, and what a subset means is that any set, so you have any element, if it's if it's um, if it's a part of the original set. So we have suppose we have this a set, 1 comma 2 comma c. So c would be a subset of a. We will have 1 comma 2 as a subset of a. We will have the null set as a subset of a, and we will have 1 comma 2 comma c also as a subset of a, and the set which contains all the subsets of a would be the power set. Okay, no issues. Mm, okay, I have quite a lot of answers. Okay, I think Tanmay Sarda, Samyak, Khushi Kucheria, then Aniruddha has given the right answer. Skanda, that's right. And Krishna, I still think you need to revise your answer. uh, I don't think it's n if the null set is included, right? Because right here you can see that the cardinality of A will be 3, and the cardinality of P of A is clearly 8. So we know that 3 is not equal to 8, and we also know that according to the earlier. Okay, so what we'll do is we will consider a construction of uh, of a power set uh, of any set x. So if we go through all the elements of x, and we know that there are n elements in x, now we go through all the elements of x and we either choose them or we don't choose them. Okay, so we have two options for all the elements. So there are n elements and we have two options for each element. For the we let's consider this for a. Okay, so we go through the first element. First element is 1. So we decide whether we want to keep it or remove it for making a subset. Okay, so we decide whether to keep it or to remove it. There are two ways. For 2, we decide whether to keep it or to remove it. There are two choices. For c, we decide whether to keep it or to remove it. There are two choices. For n, there would be n such two choices, and by the multiplication principle, we know that the choices will be independent, of course, because even if you choose one or if you don't choose two, you can still have two choices for choosing c. So by the by the multiplication rule, we know that there are two choices for the first element, two choices for second, two choices for third, and so on till the nth element. Therefore, we will have 2 to the power n number of elements in the power set, because there will be 2 to the n different subsets of a, and we are including all of them in the power set. So there will be 2 to the n elements in power sets, and 2 to the n, I refer to 2 to the power n. uh, just give me a second. Okay, so you get it, Krishna. Why is it 2 to the power n? Also, if any of you have any sort of doubts, just tell me anytime. You can raise your hand. Maybe you can just turn on your mic and you can just speak out if you have any sort of doubt, and I don't mind that at all. Yeah, anyone wanted to speak anything? Feel free to interrupt me at any time. Okay, let's. Okay, the Vishwajit, the answer is 2 to the power n. So the cardinality of the power set of any set having n elements is 2 to the power n. Okay, so let's go ahead. Okay, so now we have seen one of the tools that we can use in the long run, and which will be useful for. Okay. So 1 second. Okay. Let's go back. Okay. Aisha, what we are doing here is we actually construct a subset of the original set. So what we do is we take so we can't randomly construct a subset, or that would be chaotic. We won't be able to get a right number. So we want a proper construction. So what we do is that we go through all the elements in one way. So suppose from the left, and we choose whether we want to pick one in the subset or we don't want to pick one in the subset, because the subset can be 1 2, it can be 1 to C, it can be 2C. So if the subset is 2C, then we don't pick one. If the subset is 1 2, then we do pick one. Can anyone hear me? I mean, all of you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can
Okay.
hear you, Nikhil.
Thanks. Sorry. I thought I got disconnected. Okay. So what we are doing is we are choosing whether we want to pick every element. I mean, every element one at a time. Uh, so if you want to choose one, or you don't want to choose one, you want to choose two, don't want to choose two, want to choose three, C, don't want to choose C. So there are two choices for every element, and there are n elements. So we have 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 on for all the n choices. So there will be 2 to the power n number of subsets, and the answer is not right quite here. What we want to do is that we want to find the cardinality of the power set, but the power set includes each and every one of these distinct 2 raised to n number of subsets of the original set. So the power set is including all of these, so there has to be 2 to the power n in number of elements in each in the power set of the set. Okay, so is everybody clear with this? Because I want all of you to be clear with all the applications of the multiplication rule and the procedure perspective that we just saw. This might be new to some of you. Just tell me if this is clear in the chat, or maybe by speaking.
Nikhil, hello.
Yeah.
Where is this power set used?
Power set is used in a lot of places. I think we will go over one or two places where it can be used, and it can also be it's actually quite one of the essence of combinatorics is the power set. And in combinatorial proofs it is quite useful. We because we can represent some entities as the power set. We can represent some entities as a power set. So we can there are lots of uses, and I think we'll be going over some of them. If I won't be going, I'll think I'll post some document related to it.
Okay.
Krishna, do you
Thank.
want me to go over the procedure once again, or do you want to know how 2 to the n came from all the different things that we just discussed? Because I don't think I get it. If you have any, yeah, go on. Okay, I can't hear you. If you still have that doubt, then maybe we'll go over that later, because
Can you recap the procedure? 2 to the power n came, that one.
uh, sorry, I think we are running short of time. If you still have that doubt, we'll go over it later, because right now we should have been quite ahead. And okay, so I've already explained it thrice. Now one of another question, another important concept would be the principle of inclusion and exclusion. Uh, I think we are actually quite short of time. We will have to speed up. Okay. The principle of inclusion and exclusion is essentially for finding cardinalities of multiple sets. In the multiplication rule helped us to
Nikhil,
find.
actually, your screen is like it's fully green.
Oh. Okay. I'll try sharing again. Just give
Yes,
me a
yes,
minute.
yes.
Is it fine now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks. Oh yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'll just. Mhm. Okay, now let's go ahead. Okay, so what exactly is the principle of inclusion and exclusion? Let's see through a Venn diagram. So you have these two sets, right? These are two sets. This one contains of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 objects. And this contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 objects. So cardinality of A is 9, cardinality of B is 8. And now we define the set that is the intersection of both of these sets. You can see that these two sets are meeting each other, and there is some common area, there is some overlapped area, that is A intersection B. So that is this area which is under set A as well as set B. So the elements in these are common. So suppose you have these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and these are 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So you see that the 8 and 9 will be common in these. Okay, so and what this means is A union B, and these are actually two operations that can be performed on sets. And what we mean by A union B is this whole area covered by both A and B. Okay, so just keep track of my arrow, and this is the whole area which is covered by A and B, and that's called as A intersection B. And we can see that A intersection B can be simply represented as A plus B. But the problem with that is that we are counting this region twice, right? If we count just A and just B, then this area will be counted twice. The A intersection B will be counted twice, and A union B would not remain A union B, right? Because if we are counting this twice, then this might fit in somewhere else maybe. And so the number of elements of A union B. So right now we can see, we can just count the number of elements. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 elements in both A and B. In both A and B, and I don't mean A and B, in both A and B. So we are considering the elements of A, we are considering the elements of B, as well as the area overlapped in them only once. So we can clearly, if we were to just write the number of elements in A union B as number of elements in A plus the number of elements in B, then we would be counting this twice, right? Because this comes in both A and B. So the number of elements in A union B is the number of elements in A plus the number of elements in B minus this area once. So we get this area only once. So if we subtract this area, then everything would be fine. Now, what implications does this have? We can also say that if A and B are disjoint sets, and what do I mean by disjoint? Disjoint simply means that do not share any common elements. So if I say the set of all even numbers and the set of all odd numbers is disjoint, then I will be right. Samyak, I think we can use that, but I won't be going into that. Okay, yeah, Anju, right. So the another announcement for all of you, if you have any doubts and if you are free after 4:30, you can stay back for clearing those doubts. I will be available for some time. Okay, does everyone get this? If anyone has any queries regarding this, please unmute yourself or ask in the chat, because this is another important concept. And this is just for 2 sets. What if we have 3 sets that are intersecting with each other? We can still extend principle of inclusion exclusion for them as well. Okay, no one has any doubts, right? Okay, let's go ahead. For 2 sets, we have pi given as cardinality of A union B is equal to cardinality of A plus the cardinality of B minus the cardinality of A intersection B. And so if these are disjoint sets, then we have the cardinality of A union B is equal to cardinality of A plus cardinality of B. Because if there are disjoint, then there is no cardinality of A intersection B, because it's just 0. So we are simply adding 0 and subtracting 0, that's 0, of course. And for 3 sets, we can extend pi, and this could have been shown really nicely graphically, but right now we have only the algebraic form, that is the cardinality of A intersection the cardinality of A union B union C is equal to the cardinality of A plus the cardinality of B plus the cardinality of C minus the cardinality of A intersection B minus the cardinality of A intersection C minus the cardinality of B intersection C plus the cardinality of A intersection B intersection C. And this might seem quite what we can say unintuitive to you, but let's check out some examples that might give you a better idea, better sense. Okay, let's just see what this is. Suppose we have 2 sets defined as A is equal to all the natural numbers from 1 to 10, and the cardinality of A is 10. B is equal to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the cardinality of B is 6, right? There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we want to find the cardinality of A union B. So the set, what would the set of cardinality of the set of A union B would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But from 5 we are counting twice. We don't want to include 5 twice. In a set we only count each number once. So if you are counting multiple numbers, then that would be a multi-set, and we don't want to go into multi-set. But there are maybe we'll look at permutations of multi-sets later on. Okay, so we want to find the cardinality of A union B. So the set would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but these are common. So let's go to here directly. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that is the cardinality practically. Going theoretically, we have pi for two sets is A union B. Number of elements in A union B is equal to cardinality of A plus the cardinality of B minus the cardinality of A intersection B. And we know that A intersection B is this thing right over here that is common in both of them. And that's why 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And its cardinality is 6. Therefore, the cardinality of A union B, the number of elements in both A and B will be 10 plus 6 minus 6. And the number of elements in the set of both A and B means the number of elements in A or B. So actually, union is logically equivalent to OR, and intersection is logically equivalent to AND. So if 5 is in A and B, 2 is in A or B, right? So we can go that way. Okay, Skanda, do you have a doubt? Let's see. Yeah, you can ask your doubt.
Yeah. So if we were to draw this A and B as a Venn diagram, B would be inside.
Yeah, that's right. B would be inside A completely because yeah, it would actually be a subset of A if you want to say it that way. Then it could be a subset of A, right?
Thank you.
That's a nice observation. Okay, now we have this problem. Okay, find the number of natural numbers between 1 and 100, both are included, of integers that are divisible. Oh, I made a blunder over here. That are divisible by 4 and 5. So there's no need of these integers. Okay. We see that we can call this set of A as the natural numbers between 1 and 100 that are divisible by 4, and B as the set of the natural numbers between 1 and 100 that are divisible by 5. So we see that this set A will contain 4, then 8, then 12, then 16, 20, 24, and go on till 96 and 100. And B would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, and so on till 100. And clearly, even from this far, we can say that these two have some common elements, because this 100 is already repeated twice, and here if I would have written 20, then it would have been repeated. Of course, it is repeated because I did not write it does not mean that it is not repeated, but it is repeated. Okay, so I think I'll give you guys some time to see if you all can come up with any idea to solve it, or maybe post your answers in the chat. The answer, just the answer. I'll just have some water by then. Okay, I do have some answers, and right, Tanmay, I actually wrote it because of the wording. There's an issue. So this should be 4 or 5. That is right mathematically, but I wanted to emphasize on the fact that they should be divisible by 4, and the integers should be that are divisible by 5. So I thought of them as different subsets. So I hope that doesn't confuse any of you, but if any of you wanted some clarification, then they should be 4 or 5. Uh, okay. Samyak, how come? Okay. Okay. I think you meant 4 and 5. Oh, sorry. Okay. Let's see the right answer, which is 40, because we know that the required cardinality of A union B is by the principle of inclusion and exclusion this, and that is just the number of multiples of 4 plus the number of multiples of 5 minus the number of multiples of 4 and 5, which is the multiples of 20. But there are okay, I don't know if you guys know about the greatest integer function or not, but there will be 25 multiples of 4 within 100. There are 20 multiples of 5 within 100 and 5 multiples of 20 within 100. So the correct answer is 40, and the people who gave the correct answer are Skanda, then Khushi, Samyak, Nihira. Right. Sorry, I think that's a typo. It should be minus over here. Minus the number of multiples of 20. Minus 5. Mhm. Okay. So I hope you have noted this down, and this is just one example. We can have. Just give me a minute. There are Skanda has given the right answer. There's Kushi, there's Samyak, there's Nihira, and I think Tanmay as well. Okay, now let's move ahead. We have a lot to cover. The next question, I'll leave it to you for solving. I have given the answer already, but I think the methodology counts a lot here, and such sums need some thinking on the behalf. And in combinatorics, another quite interesting and useful fact would be complementary counting. What does complementary counting mean? So what do you call two events? When do you call two events are complementary? So if in set theory we call if a and a dash, a plus a dash equal to n. So if 2 plus 3 equal to 5, then 2 is equal to 5 minus 3, and it's that simple. You know, if a plus a dash equal to n, then number of elements in a is equal to n minus a dash, and that's just the very essence of complementary counting. But its applications are huge and vast, and they're used theoretically in every aspect of mathematics. Complements are used everywhere, in geometry, in combinatorics, in graph theory, in even probability and sort. Okay, next, this question is sort of a homework for the for those who can solve it. For those who cannot solve it, I think we'll post how we can solve it. Find the cardinality of the set of integers between 1 and 50 which are neither divisible by 2 nor by 7. So we want but I've got two different answers. Okay, so we can approach this in a different way, because if the number should not be divisible by 2, then we'll have all the odd integers, because the even numbers would be ruled out. And nor by 7 means that we can't have 7, we can't have 14, we can't have 21, we can't have 28, 35, 42, and 49. So we subtract 7, because 7 sevens are 49. So we have 25 plus 7. So okay, how does this relate here? We have we will be subtracting the number of numbers that are divisible by 2 and 7 from 50. And by that I mean the number of numbers that are divisible by 2 and the number of numbers that are divisible by 7 from 50, and that would give us the correct answer. Yeah, because we have 25 numbers which are divisible by 2, and there are 7 that's divisible by 7, but there are 7 even multiples of 7. There's 14, there's 28, and there's 42, which are even multiples of 7. So we have to count them once, so we must subtract them, and that would give us 25 plus 7 minus 3, and 25 plus 7, that would be 32 minus 3 is 29, and we need to subtract it from 50 because what we are counting here is the number of numbers that are divisible by 2 and the number of numbers that are divisible by 7. So subtracting 29 from 50, we get 21, and that is the correct answer. And I think many of you have responded in the chat. Samyak, I think you did not count the number of numbers that are divisible by 2 as well as 7. So, right. Okay, so there's a lot of answers, and I'm really wary of the. Okay, so this was just an example of what a problem can be. This such a problems are quite tricky, as you can get caught up in the numericals really easily. Okay, let's move ahead now. Okay, so one of the major topics in combinatorics is permutations, and permutations are essentially were actually first used in ancient India by the people who were living in South India, and they had found out a lot of uses for permutations because of the daily household routines that they had. They use permutations a lot of times, and um, okay, let's get into it. Okay, so what we'll be doing in permutations is that we'll be finding the number of ways of arranging some elements of a set. We have seen that there can be some elements of a set. We can see their number. We have some formulae which can be used to find the cardinality of related to permutation. What cardinalities may be related to permutation? So we'll consider an example. You are in a class with three of your friends. So there's four of you. There are 4 benches for you to sit on. Okay, so imagine you are in a class, 4 of you, and there are 4 benches to sit on. And how many ways can you all of you sit together? So it can be that there are 4 friends A, B, C, D, and we can see if there are 4 benches, first, second, third, and fourth. So we can arrange it like this: A, B, C, D. Then we can have some CBDA. Maybe we can have DCBA. We can have DABC. We can have CBDA. We can have CBAD, and all of that stuff. And so it's just like the actually it is just one part of the power set. Right, Tanmay. We'll get into factorials in some time. So let's construct a procedure for finding the number of ways in which they can sit differently each time. Yeah, differently matters here because if it's not differently, then there won't be any different ways, because ABCD itself is a set and it's unordered, but each of these is ordered, right? ABCD, ACBD, ACDB. Maybe you could have ABCD, maybe you could have ADBC, maybe you could have ADCB, and that's just with A in the first place. You could have B in the first place, C and D in the first place. Okay. You take the 4 places. We will consider the procedure of assigning a permutation of students to the benches. And what would be a permutation? A permutation is anything like ACBD or maybe DBAC. So for the first step, we can choose a student for the first bench. So there will be 4 ways, because you can put any of the 4 students over there. But now there are only 3 students left, because you cannot put the first student in the first bench as well as the second bench. So for the second step, you can only have 3 ways, and similarly 2 and 1 ways for the third and fourth bench, because you cannot put the first in the second and the second in the third and third in the fourth as well, because you only have 1 copy of each of them. So the number of ways of arranging such a permutation number of ways of arranging the students or forming such a permutation would be 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 by the multiplication rule, because the steps are independent, as we had already seen due to the tree diagram example. And we have 24 ways of arranging students, and if we have to generally use the permutation of n objects, then we have n factorial permutations, and you have already seen some use of factorials in mathematics. Their properties are quite different, and what is exactly a factorial? So a really useful tool is the factorial notation. We define the factorial of a natural number a, and please note that factorials are up till what we have learned are only defined for natural numbers. Actually there are some definitions of factorials for real numbers as well, but we won't get into that because it's quite tough. And we define the factorial of a natural number a as a factorial is equal to a times a minus 1 times a minus 2 times a minus 3 times a minus 4 times a minus 5, and so on till 3, 2 and 1. So what we are doing is we are essentially multiplying all the numbers which are less than a serial. So it of course multiplication is associative, so we can multiply them in any way, but for understanding we are multiplying a times 1 less than a times 2 less than a times 3 less than a, and so on till 1. So a could have also been 3. For 3 factorial would have been 3 times 2 times 1. For 6 factorial will be 6 times 5 times 3 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And for a it will be a factorial is equal to a times a minus 1 times a minus 2 and so on till 2 into 1. Okay, let's go ahead, and these are just some examples. 4 factorial is 24, 6 factorial is 720, and there are very small examples like n factorial is equal to n into n minus 1 factorial, because we are just multiplying. N minus 1 factorial will only be n minus 1 times n minus 2 times n minus 3 and so on till 1. But if we multiply n, then it would be n factorial, right? Because it's the same thing, because we have defined factorials in that way. Also, one important assumption would be that 0 factorial is equal to 1. We'll assume this without going into proving this because it's quite controversial. Okay, now we are inside the crux of permutations, and this equation really changes the whole thing because this is actually the number of permutations of R objects arranged n at a time. N objects arranged R at a time. In general, if we want to find the number of ways of permuting or arranging R objects from a total of n objects, so what we want to say here is that R is less than or equal to n. So the formula that we have here is for P n comma R, and P n comma R is just the notation for permutation of R objects from n objects. So n can take any value, R can take any value less than n. So permutation is just the ways of arranging, and a permutation of R objects is just the way of arranging R objects from n objects. So for a set, we can say that the 2 permutation of a set could be 1 2 2 3 3 4 5 4 5 5 6 and so on. A 3 permutation could be 1 2 3 2 3 4 3 4 5 and so on. A 5 permutation could be 1 2 3 4 5 2 3 4 5 6 and so on. A n permutation would be 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 n. So I hope all of you are getting it, and this is quite an important concept. So if any one of you has any doubts regarding it, please ask in the chat maybe, or if you want you can raise your hand. Okay, so all of you can hear me, right? Okay. Thanks. Okay, does anyone have any doubts? I guess not. Okay, so let's go ahead. So this is just a small example of showing how the multiplication principle agrees with the permutations formula that we have seen, and we will go on without proving the permutations formula because proving it is out of scope for this class. Maybe we'll prove it in future lectures of the IMO busters. Okay, so find the number m of permutations of 6 objects, say A, B, C, D, E, F, taken 3 at a time. And this is just the same as the number of 3 permutations of 6 objects, right? So the 3 permutations of 6 objects would be P6, 3. And that's it. We don't want to evaluate it or something. We just, so more important at this time would be to identify how you are answering the question, and it's not what the answer is exactly. That at this point of time, what I would think is most important is understanding why this would mean P of 6, 3. Why not P of 6, 7? Right, we could have taken that, but why do we want to take P of 6, 3? Why 3 only? Because it's just because we are taking 3 at a time, and it's a 3 permutation of 6 objects. Right, so this agrees with the multiplication formula. This is the same as the multiplication rule. The first part is just the multiplication rule, and this is the PNR formula. Right. Okay. So I hope no one has any doubts, and let's go ahead. This is really fun part because I like how this goes ahead. And now just an example, and I have written the answer over here, so it's not quite hard to solve this. So if you are a singer who wants to go on a tour, there are 7 songs that you can sing, and suppose that the order of the songs does matter. Suppose that you must you can sing, if you sing A, B, C, D, it's different from singing A, C, B, D, or maybe it's different from singing B, C, B, A, and so on. Okay, that is quite important, because if you are not considering that, then it's a different context. Then it would become combinations, right? So how many ways can you pick 3 songs from 7 such that the order matters? So there are 7 songs. We want to find the 3 permutation, and that's it. That's P of 7, 3. Yeah, that's it, right? That would be 210, right, Skanda? What I want to say is that the formula does not matter. It's the understanding that matters here. Even in the test that you will get in the assignment, I think that I have multiple options so that you can answer in P of n comma r, or in the factorial notation as well. So I think Samyak and Krishna have put their answer. It's fine. Even Skanda. So what I want you to know is not to how to evaluate P of 7, 3. I want you to understand why it's P of 7, 3. And sorry if we are getting a bit late. Okay, I think we should just give me a minute. Okay, let's just go over this last thing. Okay, so there are 5 distinct fruits in a basket, and you want to eat 1 fruit each day for 3 days. In how many ways can you eat the fruits? So here clearly the order matters, right? So you eat a pear on day 1, and you eat a banana on day 2, and you eat an apple on day 3 is not the same as you eating an apple on day 1, banana on day 2, and pear on day 3. So how many ways can you eat the fruits? Okay, I've got 2 answers already, and you can put your answers in the chat. Right, Tanmay. Samyak, Krishna, Tanmay, Skanda have already given the answer, and that's true. Yeah, Samyak, it's the same as 5p3 or P of 5, 3. And that's because we just want a 3 permutation of 5 and 3, of 5 distinct objects. So we by the formula we can get 60, or else it, even if you leave it at P of 5, 3, that's enough for this for right now, right? So it's just P of n comma r with n equal to 5 and r equal to 3. Yes, Vishwajit, how can it be 15? we are not multiplying. We want to find p of 5 comma 3, and p of 5 comma 3 is 5 factorial upon 2 factorial, and simply evaluating gives us 120 over 2, which is 60. That's wrong. 15 would be wrong. So Skanda, Samyak, Krishna have given the right answer, and that's not of much importance according to me, because anyone can evaluate this, but what it's important is we need to understand. Okay, so another scenario, what I want to do is make you familiar with what scenarios the question may come. So another scenario would be that there is a race between 100 contestants, and similarly you can have 100 people who want to contest for maybe a job, and you want to pick only the first prize winner, the second prize winner, and the third prize winner. So in the job scenario, you could maybe want to choose some 3 types of different jobs. Maybe if you want to choose a president, a treasurer, and a secretary. So these scenarios are different, but the answer and the theory remains the same, that you just want to select 3 people from 100 people. You want to select a 3 permutation from 100. So answer will remain the same, that is p of 100 comma 3. Yeah, Imran, we are ending. Okay, so that's it for today, and sorry for taking some extra time, but if you have any doubts, you can stay back, and if not, I think we can stop here.